This is Bean to Barstool, a podcast that looks at the intersections of craft chocolate, craft beer, and other artisan drinks. My name is David Nilsson. I'm a professional drinks writer, an advanced cicerone, the author of Pairing Beer and Chocolate, and the creator and host of this show. The music for this episode is by my dear friend, indie folk musician Anna P.S. You can find out more about Anna's music in the show notes or on annapsmusic.com. You can find links and information about our guests in the show notes as well. I hope you enjoy this episode of Bean to Barstool. Hey everyone, welcome back to Bean to Barstool. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, the name Tyler Cagwin will be familiar to you. He is the owner and chocolate maker at Nostalgia Chocolates, formerly of New York State and now operating in North Carolina. I had Tyler on the show a couple times several years ago, and I also interviewed him for the Bean to Barstool blog, talking about not only making great chocolate, but his collaborations and intersections with the craft brewing world, both for his chocolate bars and also providing ingredients for various breweries in the upstate New York region and then now in North Carolina. If you don't exist in and around the craft beer world, you might be surprised to know that North Carolina is one of the absolute best craft beer states in the country. So he is now making chocolate right in the heart of one of the hotbeds of craft beer. And he is working with quite a few breweries around him to supply them with cacao nibs and other cacao products for their beers. This is a pretty significant part of Nostalgia's business model. So I reached out to Tyler to see if he could give us some advice on things that craft chocolate makers should keep in mind if they want to start working with breweries to be ingredient suppliers and sell cacao nibs and husks and other things like that to breweries. Tyler has a ton of great advice to share in this conversation about things to consider in advance, how to get those conversations going with breweries, how to establish those relationships, how to fit this into your production schedule and business model and all of that. So a really great conversation with Tyler. I'm so grateful that he was willing to share all this. And if you've been considering making this part of your craft chocolate business, this conversation is the place to start. So here is Tyler Cagwin of Nostalgia Chocolate. Tyler, welcome back to Bean to Barstool. What have you been up to since the last time we spoke?
Well, thanks, David. It's really great to be back. Always love the conversation and all of the stuff you do to help support both the beer and the chocolate industry. So thank you very much. Yeah, it's been a few years. So I moved from Syracuse, New York, down to a town called Huntersville, North Carolina, which is about 20 minutes north of Charlotte. And I've been here for almost 3 years now and I closed the business for about 6 months when we moved and then trying to find new space to get reset up and whatnot. So it was closed for maybe 6 months, but I've been reopened now with a storefront, which I didn't have in Syracuse, as well as the roasting space for, it was 2 years back in like around Thanksgiving time.
Okay, great. Well, you make a range of excellent chocolate bars, both single origin and inclusion. But today, what we want to talk about is a kind of side part of your business where you are providing ingredients for the excellent beer scene in North Carolina. A ton of craft breweries there. I know you were doing this in New York as well. Let's talk a little bit about how you work with these breweries. So if you're starting from nowhere and you don't have a relationship with breweries, how are you approaching craft breweries and kind of getting them interested in that relationship?
Yeah, well, it's certainly easier once you can get your claws into one of them. But when I first got down here, I started reaching out. Like I found a list of all of the breweries that were in the Charlotte area. And I started first going to their websites, trying to get a sense of, are they just IPA? Are they just like, are wheat beers their main thing, or do they actually brew dark beers? And I try to get a little bit of information. One, so I wasn't blindly reaching out, and just having them say, like, this is nothing, either just ignore me or this is nothing at all that we're interested in. But I also wanted to learn a little bit about the breweries themselves. So I could say, if there was one that they brewed that seemed really interesting, I could be like, wow, this is really cool. It'd be really neat to have my cocoa nibs as part of this and just try to start a conversation that way. The return on investment as far as sending blind messages is very little. And I think far less here in the Charlotte area than it was when I would reach out to places in upstate New York. And I think the only reason I can come to with that is just because Charlotte's a very big city, and I'm sure these places are getting inundated with messages of uniforms and paper towels and all sorts of things. I have no doubt. The other thing that I would also try to do is like reach out to the brewery. And then if I didn't get any response there, potentially the next step would be to try to find the head brewer's Instagram or Facebook and potentially try to reach out that way. So that was kind of where I started. And then from there, obviously, if I got response, and they were interested, I would try to set up a meeting. If I didn't, my next step oftentimes was just to pull together some samples. Like I put together little bags of cocoa nibs, and then I always take the accompanying chocolate that I make with it. And so they can try the cocoa nibs and also try the chocolate itself. And so I would just walk in, which again, like not it can be received in one of two ways. And I guess my feeling always was if I am welcomed, then that's probably somebody I want to work with and they're interested. And if I wasn't, then I just move on. I mean, I know that in my store, when I have people come in that are trying to sell me internet or sell me paper, whatever, I mean, as much as I appreciate that that's their job and they're trying to do it, it's also a waste of my time. So I try to be very respectful of that and not really take it personally if it's not well received.
Mhm.
But then I just, I try to move on and keep going.
A lot of breweries that are working with cocoa nibs and don't have a, craft chocolate source like yourself, they're buying from a third party source. They maybe don't know a lot about cacao at all. In North Carolina, there are a couple other craft chocolate makers that have a significant part of their business that is selling to breweries. Do you see any kind of like response like that where they're saying, "Hey, we actually already have this craft chocolate source"? Do most of them fall into that bucket of not really understanding what this is?
Well, surprisingly, in the Charlotte area, I've actually found more often that breweries had stopped brewing stouts and porters because of the quality of cocoa nibs that they were getting because there wasn't somebody like myself or
Mm.
Videri or French Broad or a number of the other smaller makers that are in North Carolina. So they just what they were getting was just such garbage. And so what I've actually found is that in most of the cases, they're very excited to know that I'm around. And one of the things that I tried, once I can make contact, number one, when I take the samples, I try to have that stuff. I mean, I roast in small batches, 5 to 6 pounds at a time anyway. So I'm roasting very small to begin with. But I try to have the samples I'm taking roasted relatively close to when I'm planning to go to drop in to meet or to take them the samples or just cold call or whatever it might be. And the main reason for that is because they're used to getting cocoa nibs that are oxidized, that are
Mhm.
gray, that don't really have much flavor. Who knows how long they've been sitting around? They might have an origin slapped on them, but the origin means nothing. And a lot of times, just like I don't know much about hops or grains, and I've learned over the years, most head brewers, or if you are lucky enough to have a true brew master in your area, they oftentimes don't know a lot about chocolate. I have found the same thing with restaurants, even high-end restaurants, and they just think what falls off the Cisco truck is just what they should be, selling their $15 slice of chocolate pie for. And, I think what the brewery world, more than the restaurant world, I have found really enjoys the education about it. And so when I can show up and they can open up one of the little packs of cocoa nibs and without them even putting their nose in it, it just is blowing, peach and cinnamon and all these wonderful scents coming off of the cocoa nibs, they're immediately just like blown away. And then their brains are like, oh, and then I usually take four different origins. I find that more than that can be a little bit overwhelming. And less than that, it would be fine, but doesn't necessarily showcase the value that we as small batch chocolate makers bring.
Mhm.
And so when they smell Colombia versus India versus Tanzania or versus Madagascar, it really opens their eyes up and they can say, oh, like I stopped in at one when I was going out to drop off bars to a new wholesale account, and I had driven by it one time, and they have like a little wooden sign at the top of the road down to their brewery. So when I went back out, like while I was there talking with the two head brewers, they were like, "Oh man, we wanted to do this banana stout, and this would be perfect." Blah blah blah. So I think it also kind of brings some inspiration into their world, knowing that cacao has different flavor notes, and that there's somebody here that can roast it. Oftentimes, I'll roast the same day I'm delivering,
Mm.
and I've brought the cocoa nibs when they're still warm. And the brewers always open them up and are just like, this is incredible. So when I go, that's what I do. I take a few sample bags, and I take the chocolate, I make small half-ounce tasting bars, and I take those with me as well because I want the one, it's a nice touch and they enjoy it, but also I want the brewery staff and employees to understand what the chocolate becomes when sugar's added. Because during the brewing process, the yeast and all the starches and all this, like there is a sweetening of the beer that happens. And the cocoa nibs, when they mix with those sugars, not that it's going to become a 70% chocolate bar, but it will have some effect on the flavor of the cocoa nibs. So,
Mm.
I want them to understand that, the India has these sort of flavor notes. So it's going to potentially impart small bits of that into the beer. The Tanzania, like I had a brewery back in New York that I used to work with, and they made a beer that tasted like cherry Coke. And so it was, Tanzania all day long because at least the way that I roast the Tanzania, it's got a lot of cherry flavor note. So that's the reason that I take the packages of the nibs and the bars as well. So
Very cool. So when you finally get that face-to-face time with the brewers, do you find that there are consistent questions that they're often asking you?
We'll be right back.
Hey everyone, Final Gravity issue 12 is now available in the Bean to Barstool shop. This new issue of our zine, telling personal, human-centered stories from the world of beer, is full of great articles, including Miranda Moore's article about the cultural connotations in South Africa of Carling Black Label Lager, or Brett Cordelletti's profile of the Palestinian brewery Teba, among many others. We believe passionately about this project, and we'd love for you to check it out. You can order individual copies or subscribe on beantobarstool.com. We also now have taproom level subscriptions, so breweries can get a discount on ordering multiple copies of each issue, or you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/beantobarstoolzines. You can also check out our new website for Final Gravity at finalgravityzine.com. Cheers!
yeah, I think so. Mostly it's just about the different origins, and they want to know, well, what do most people use? And so there are, out of the 8 origins that I work with, there's probably 3 main ones that most breweries tend to turn to. I'm not exactly sure why. And some of them potentially aren't the best. Like Madagascar, probably a tough one to brew with because it's very bright and very citrusy. And while it makes exceptional chocolate and is really great in baking certain things, it's not good. It's like, for me, I don't like it as chocolate chips for a chocolate chip cookie. It just
Yeah.
doesn't, and the same thing. So, there's questions like that come about. But for the most part, not really. I think they're just excited to be able to have somebody that has this product because they're not used to having that. And it also sets even if it's a bunch of breweries in the same city, it also sets them apart from breweries that are in neighboring cities or things like that.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Is there information you've found you need to provide breweries that maybe they aren't aware they need to ask because they don't understand a lot about cacao or chocolate?
I don't really think so. I mean, they know so much about what they do. And, I think there's only been one time where I was bringing a product to them that they had never worked with before. I think a lot of times the questions are just pretty basic. Like, here's what we're thinking for this beer. And, they might say, like, what are your thoughts on what origin we should use? Or, but they also know how much they're typically going to need. So, no, I mean, I think at least in my case, I've been pretty lucky. I've learned more from them than probably they've learned from me necessarily, just because there's so much more involved, with learning about the grains and the malts and the different hops and all, there's just so much more that goes into it. So yeah, I wouldn't be for people that are concerned about stepping out of their comfort zone and are worried that questions are going to get asked that they don't know the answer to. I would be very surprised if anything like that ever came up. And I've also never, I've been in sales jobs before this, and I've also always been a big believer in if I don't know the answer, I think it's far more professional just to say, you know what, I'm not exactly sure about that. Let me
Mhm.
do some research and get back to you. And then get back to them. Not only will it make you look like a better, stronger, more knowledgeable person, but also it gives you another reason to reach out to them again
Yeah.
after the first meeting to say, "Oh, hey, like the next day I got you. I reached out to my friends at so and so, and here was their answer." I've had more questions like that come up in working with restaurants, if depending on the formulations of things, but I haven't found it too much with the breweries.
Yeah. I think there's a trust factor in that too. When they see that you're willing to say, I don't know the answer, but I'll find it. They know you're not just BSing them on everything else, making up things that you
Yeah,
don't have that
absolutely. It
answer to.
definitely adds a big trust factor between the both sides. So.
Yeah. By nature of scale and quality, I'm sure your nibs have a little higher sticker price than what they might be used to on some of the other nibs they're getting. Do you find that there's much salesmanship that has to go into that, or does the product kind of sell itself?
I think it pretty much sells itself. I mean, lucky, I have more pushback with the restaurants than I do with the breweries. I potentially even, I don't think I necessarily need to because I'm just selling cocoa nibs, but they probably could be sold for a little more than what they are. But no, so far nobody has said anything like about the price. I mean, maybe I've had some with the numbers that I've reached out to. It's possible I've had a couple that have just not responded because of that. But I think my prices are pretty much in line with what is getting charged elsewhere. So at least on a larger scale
Mhm.
situation.
So you do provide that pricing even when you're cold contacting the breweries.
If they ask, I will. I mean, I don't. Usually, that is one of the questions that comes up, but I've never. It's never been like I don't walk in and say, "Here are my cocoa nibs. Price is $16 a pound." I kind of just let that. I let them experience the product first,
Sure.
and I've also found it if there's a way that you can have more than just one person involved, that can also be very helpful. So if there's a way to also meet the head of like brewery operations or maybe even if it's a brewery that has a restaurant involved or an events person, I would also try to meet with them as well while you're there because that'll turn into more things down the road rather than just cocoa nibs. And I also, where I have found the greatest success is once I have gotten one brewery that has purchased the nibs and then followed up and they were very impressed with them, I will ask, are there any other people that you can connect me with?
Mm.
Because that's the way that it'll be a better use of time as you're going forward because you're not spinning your wheels trying to reach out via Instagram or Facebook or emails or whatever, the using the contact forms on the website is completely
Oh,
useless. I don't know where that
yeah.
goes. Um,
Those might
so
as
if
well not exist.
yeah, totally. So if you can have, Ed from brewery A email Tony from Brewery C and say, "Hey, Tony," like, because they all have relationships,
Hmm.
and they're also the ones that can say, you maybe don't want to go towards this direction, but this group is really, really great. They'd be totally receptive. And there was one brewery here in Huntersville that I worked with, 760 Craft Works, and I asked Brent, the head brewer there, I was like, I've been trying to reach out to so and so. He's like, "Oh my goodness, we need to connect you with Fetty at Town Brewing. He's amazing." And Fetty has turned into like one of my biggest supporters. Like I'll just get an email where he's connecting me without me even asking. He's connected me with the owner of a wine bar because they wanted to start selling my tasting. They sell chocolate and other things, and they were looking for a local chocolate person. So that's turned into a new account. And he's connected me with this person, and he includes me in this event and that event. So I think, and also the other thing I would say, and it's a little bit of an expense, but when you go in to meet with these people, if you haven't tried their beer before, or even if I would recommend you try it before you go. But whether you have or haven't, I always try to buy at least like a 4-pack while I'm there, just because
Hmm.
I know when I'm being like when people ask me for things, I'm much more likely to support them if they buy a bar.
Sure.
I get people walking in, "Oh, we have this event and that event." There's only so much I can do to give out free stuff. But if you're somebody who will support me and buy something from me, I'm more likely to support you. And I think that that also goes a long way for not only you understanding the brewery and
Hmm.
how they brew and what they're looking for, whether it's a dark beer or an IPA or whatever, but it also shows like that you're going to be there to support them as well because it's a team effort for sure.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So once a brewery decides to buy nibs from you, walk us through a little bit of how that actual workflow goes from there when they need nibs from you.
So when I meet with them, I always ask for at least I try to have them give me 2 weeks notice. Just because I'm a one-man shop and I have the storefront, I'm usually only roasting like Mondays and Tuesdays. And so if they're going to need, as long as they let me know before that, but if they contact me on a Wednesday and they need it Thursday afternoon or Friday, I will make it happen, but it's not ideal, because I also, at the end of the day, even though it's just chocolate making, I'm exhausted and I don't want to
Sure.
turn the roaster on and let it warm up for just to roast 5 or 10 pounds of cocoa nibs. Again, I won't say no because I need everything I can get. But I always, when I meet with them, I try to say, if you can give me at least a week's notice, preferably 2 weeks notice, which normally they can because they have a brewing schedule that they're going to brew this beer this week and this beer next week and blah, blah, blah. Then I know that once all they need to do is just email me the origin and the quantity and then the date that they want it or the date they're planning to drop it in. And I will add it into my roasting schedule as close to that date as I possibly can. So, I mean, even if the cocoa nibs are roasted a week before, they're still far better than what they're going to be getting from, the grain wholesaler that's, the malt wholesaler that's also selling cocoa nibs. But I think also there's a lot of, especially local breweries that these days love the local connection. So, if they're brewing something with figs or peaches or sweet potato or whatever it is, they want to get those things as local as possible. And then to also be able to say, "Oh, the cocoa nibs are, from India and that they were roasted up in Huntersville." And, having that connection is sort of a bragging right for a lot of breweries.
Yeah. Let's sidetrack onto that for just a moment. Do you encourage or request that Nostalgia's name and or logo or anything like that goes onto the branding for these beers?
No, I don't. I mean, it's happened a handful of times and I mean, I don't know if anybody else notices it, but it is really cool when the logo shows up on the artwork on the can or things like that. So I don't require it, but if a brewery wants to do it, I'm certainly not going to say no just because again, I don't think it necessarily, I don't think people are looking at it really, or if it registers with them or not, but it is just a cool experience to
Yeah.
have. I think the one thing I wish to that point about the logo on the can, kind of going one step farther, one area where I think would be a cool opportunity and one I haven't really done too much with, but is taking the time to provide a little more information to the bartenders
Mm,
who are working at the brewery so that, again, I don't know if it would go in one ear and out the other, but that potentially is another way to build the relationship even more. And if it wasn't a situation where you could sit down with them, one thing you could do, and I'm actually thinking this would be a good idea for me to do, but you could make up little cards, with the name of the beer, the origin of chocolate, where it's roasted, because that's something that a bartender behind the bar, when somebody orders the beer, could say, "Oh man, the cocoa nibs that
yeah.
were in this beer were roasted up in Huntersville, and the figs came from one of our owners' farms or yards, or So it's
Yeah.
just one next step of education. And what I learned not too long ago is that a lot of these the head brewers, oftentimes started as bartenders in the brewery. And they just, every so often, there's one person that just wants to learn a lot of stuff, and then they move
Yeah.
up the ladder. So you just never know when there is going to be somebody that will be into that knowledge.
Well, and at the point of service, it takes so little to hook a customer. Just like one detail like that can take this from being something that tastes good to now something that they're curious about. It does not take much.
For sure.
Yeah.
And if
Um,
if it's a customer that's at the bar saying, "Oh, I'm deciding between XYZ beer and ABC beer," that's a situation where the bartender could be like, "Well, in ABC beer, blah blah blah, and the cocoa nibs were grown in Costa Rica and have flavor notes of this, and it really brings a nice addition."
yeah, absolutely. Is there anything you do or anything that can be done on the storytelling side? And when you see one of these beers comes out that your nibs are in, do you share that story on Instagram or anything like that?
Oh, I always do. For a handful of reasons. One, because it potentially can draw in another brewery that might reach out to you because they all sort of follow each other. If there's a way that if the brewery's going to release a post about it, or if you're going to get their okay, but make them co-creators or whatever it's called. So then your post either shows up on their feed or their post shows up on your feed. Oftentimes the person that's doing the social media, especially if they want to have a say in what's said or whatever, it's easy for them because it's one less post they need to do, and for you it's one less day you need to post something. So I absolutely do. And what I'll also usually do is go in and take a photo with the chocolate bar that is those cocoa nibs. And I will use that as my post so that the bar is kind of broken up. And even the one of the breweries here, we kind of put the chocolate piece into the beer. So it was like sticking out. So there's a lot of like fun
Yeah.
things you can do. And then yeah, so 100%. I mean, I brag about that as much as I possibly can. And also, I mean, the only breweries that I go to or purchase anything from are the ones that support me. So it's just, again, it just as many ways as you can to deepen the relationship and make, they used to, the company I worked for in like real life job, they always said like the more products that one place has, the stickier they are, the more
Mm.
that they're going to know you and turn to you. And I think the same is true in this situation. The more value you can provide above and beyond just a 5 or 10, 20 pound bag of cocoa nibs, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah, it definitely makes you more valuable because you're also potentially bringing your customers now to that beer as well.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you just mentioned different sizes of bags. You roast 5 to 6 pounds at a time, you said, and I know some of these orders might be significantly larger than that. How does this have to work into your schedule? Do you have to make significant adjustments for some of these larger breweries?
Yeah, well, I've only had one that was like really big for me, and that was back in Syracuse. I had one brewery that ordered, I think, 50 pounds of cocoa nibs, and that was a lot of roasting because, if you're roasting 5.5 pounds of beans, there's probably at least a pound of loss once you winnow and lose the shell and the weight of whatever else gets lost there. So yeah, that can certainly take time. To be completely transparent, I wish the orders I was getting were bigger than they are now. I think being in the South, it's the runs of dark beer are smaller just because our weather down here is so much warmer than in Syracuse you had, I don't know, 4 months of heavy winter and a few shoulder months that are
Yeah.
winter-ish. So it was just a much longer dark beer sort of season. So, but it's a little more of a numbers game with the breweries here, trying to have more to compensate for that part of it. So
Is there anything you do from a roasting profile standpoint that is different when you know this is going into beer, or is that something you're consulting with individual brewers on?
I don't change a thing. My roast profiles are what they are. I roast so that ultimately when I'm making the chocolate, I love bright fruity chocolate. I know people that don't. They like the more nutty chocolate. So we all have our own things, which is one of the really great things about our little niche of the industry. But also, I think the breweries are choosing cocoa nibs. I think one of the best value adds is that what they're going to buy on a wholesale level is just going to be dumpy chocolate, which, when the cocoa nibs were roasted, for the most part, they were probably roasted to the point that all flavor note was taken out. So when I go to meet with these places, that's one of the really cool things is you just see their eyes explode and they just are blown away at the flavor profiles and the flavor notes and all of that sort of stuff that goes into the chocolate world. Like knowing that, India versus Madagascar versus Tanzania, just knowing that they all taste very different really just blows people's minds. And to me, that seeing that happen, which again is another reason why I bring 3 or 4 different origins, I want that to also come through in their beers. I don't want it to be a situation where they're just looking for just a chocolate. I want them to say, oh, well, this India has a little bit of a peach note, and that would be really good to help accentuate the sweet, I don't know, the sweet potato or the whatever.
Mhm.
I want that to be part of what their thought process is.
Yeah, for sure. Is this a significant enough part of your business, or do you anticipate it becoming such that this is impacting your bean ordering in terms of your long-term plans on how much you need to order of this or that origin?
Um, I mean, it's not as big as I would like it to be. I think the beer world is kind of in a weird situation right now
Hmm.
where there's just a plethora of other options out there. I mean, I'm a bourbon, beer, and wine person. Like those are my drinks. Nothing's ever going to change that. So I'm a big believer in the work that these craft breweries are doing. I think it's more than just, your Budweiser, Miller Lite, Coors Light. It's really an amazing art that these breweries come up with. With that being said, though, I think a lot of breweries have sort of taken a back seat to the dark beers or put those sort of on the back seat or back burner for the time being. And hopefully that will start to change because I would love this to become a bigger part of my business. Last year I probably added, maybe even on a small scale, I probably added 3 or 4 new breweries to what I have been doing. And I think was less than what I had wanted to, given the numbers that are here. But I think I've tried to one now that I have now that I have maybe 6 or 7 that periodically order from me, I'm trying to use them, like I said earlier, to network into some of these other ones. And so it's just it's a more organic way to build the business, but it's a slower way to build the business because I'm just not hounding, emails and, driving around town all day long trying to just
Sure.
drop off samples and whatnot. So you just got to kind of figure out what is the most efficient way for you to try to build that part of the business. But I do think it's an extremely important one. If people have the ability to be able to roast, even for just a few breweries, I think it's to bring that to further spread kind of the magic of what chocolate is, really is. I think, it's going to take all of us to build that ship and create
Hmm.
more awareness in the brewery industry.
Yeah, for sure. Do you deliver these orders directly to breweries? Do you
Yeah.
ever ship to breweries?
Well, if it's far away, like if I don't have too many. I wish I was able to maintain my ones back up north. I have more restaurants I ship blocks of chocolate to than I do breweries that still use my cocoa nibs. But I'll ship there, or if it's someplace that's, out of town. But if it's in town, I always even with the blocks of restaurant chocolate, I always prefer to deliver. I like to be the face that's handing them off, and especially at a brewery, then I can stop and grab a beer, or sit down with the head brewer or whoever is there and just kick back and catch up and, again, deepen that relationship. So I mean, the cost of it costs less to drive and deliver it than it would to ship it. And if I can try to save customers money whenever possible, I always, even if it might cost me a few bucks, I always try. I think for a number of reasons, I would always encourage people to deliver them yourself. I mean, the hardest part is walking in the first time. So once you've done that and you've got the relationship, the rest of it's just fun. Like sit down and like I just did a beer and chocolate pairing event with one of the breweries here. And that came about just because I was in there hanging out with them, and we were just throwing ideas back and forth. And I said, well, how about we do this? And they said, oh my goodness, that would be absolutely incredible. And it was a great event and they want to do it again. So I just think those sorts of warm walk-ins, the more of those you can have, the better off you're going to be.
I love that. We've talked about nibs this entire time. Have you had any luck with like husks or other ingredients?
Yeah, husk. There's a couple breweries, and I always pitch that too because I charge $5 a pound for the husk. If I'm not sending it off that way, unfortunately now it's going to be waste. I used to give it to a farm that I would get my meats from back up north, but I haven't found a place like that down here yet. So I would love to find more use for it. I just haven't at this time. But if I try to keep it cheap, but it is still part of the product. So if I can make a few bucks on it, I try to. But I always, in the initial meeting, I always pitch that because I want them to know that if they need that extra punch of chocolate, that husk is also a very inexpensive option and one that they should consider. And also from one of your earlier podcasts, I believe that the woman who ran this chocolate shop down in maybe Clearwater.
Oh yeah, Ratza.
Ratza, I think she may have closed, but in one of your podcasts, it's always stuck with me. I'm pretty sure it was with her. She did some work with breweries, and there was a brewery down there that was using the husk in maybe wheat beers or something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
I always just try to throw other ideas out there because that's something that's extremely rare. And, something that even if they wanted to just do a small test run, I'm like, if you want to do a test run with it and see how it goes, I'll just give you some and see what happens. And if it works and you want to do more with it, then we'll deal with, then we can do pricing from there. But yeah, I mean, anything that I can possibly sell, I always, I always try to. So
Yeah, no, that's great. Is there anything else you think would be beneficial for a chocolate maker to think about before they get into working with breweries?
We'll be right back.
Hey everyone, you may have noticed things in the world aren't awesome right now, and social media kind of reflects that. I built a lot of the following for Bean to Barstool and just for my own writing career on Instagram, but I've been getting significantly lower returns in terms of engagement on Instagram, and well, some of their recent changes don't have me thrilled for the future. So, here are some ways to keep up with Bean to Barstool if Instagram and other social media platforms don't prove to be long-term viable solutions. If you do nothing else, sign up for the Bean to Barstool newsletter. You can do that by going to beantobarstool.com/newsletter-signup. That link is in the show notes. That is a weekly email newsletter that covers all the same things we cover here on the podcast. Speaking of, subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Wherever you listen to Bean to Barstool, go there and subscribe to make sure you get notifications of new episodes. If you're a proud millennial like me and you still use an RSS feeder, you can also subscribe to our blog posts, which come out at least weekly. Also, if you are still on social media but don't love Meta right now, you can check me out over on Blue Sky. I'm on there under my personal account at David Nilsson Beer, but I do post all the Bean to Barstool content over there as well. Finally, if you want to get in touch with me directly, you can email beantobarstool@gmail.com. I am not leaving Instagram anytime soon, but these are great ways to make sure you can keep up with what I have going on. Stay safe and take care of each other.
Well, yeah, we also touched briefly, maybe when we were just chit-chatting beforehand, but we talked a little bit about some of the bars that I've made. So for some of the breweries that I work closely with, I've taken the cocoa nibs back after they've finished with them. So they've soaked in the beer, they pull them out, put them in a plastic bag, But one thing I would say is I do my own label design. And so just because I can't afford a designer. So in those instances, I've taken the cocoa nibs back and I've made different bars. And so that's another thing that can be super cool, not only for you to be able to sell, but also for the brewery to be able to have and sort of brag about is, and then make a small run of some sort of chocolate, whether it be dark chocolate, dark milk, whatever, you might want to do, because it's a really cool experience for beer drinkers and a really great addition to your lineup that you will potentially only be able to do once with that exact thing, because they may not ever brew that beer again, first of all. But if they do, it probably won't taste exactly the same. So it's a cool sales thing where you can say, once these are gone, they're gone. So get them, if you like it, grab a few of them because they won't be here for too much longer. But I would also, once you're comfortable with delivering the cocoa nibs and that part of it, and you have the capability to do this, I would also offer to say, hey, let me take those back, because they're just going to throw them out. So and oftentimes they will then wholesale or, buy wholesale a number of the bars. And so what I'll do is I'll give them a discount when I go back and sell them wholesale. But it's also another great income stream for you, because then you got a new bar that you can sell and something new to post about and talk about. So I would also just, after you've again gotten in with the brewery and they've placed an order, I would just keep that in mind as well. But it's a great outlet, especially if you're a beer drinker. It's a really fun way to utilize the work that you're doing and help educate more people about the industry.
Yeah, I love that. And it's such a cool continuation of the story. Anytime I've been leading a tasting with beer or spirits infused bars, and specifically it is nibs that have been reclaimed from that process, everybody is always so excited about it, because
Yeah.
even if there definitely is a flavor influence versus just soaking the nibs in the finished product. But even if there weren't, there's something like in the mind that just
Yeah.
latches onto that and gets so excited about the idea that this actually went into this, rum or stout or whatever it is. It's so cool.
Yeah, for sure.
In a previous episode, you and I talked extensively about your hop aged bar. The last thing I want to talk about is, are we going to see that bar again?
Yeah.
What's the
Yeah.
status there?
Well, yes, we will. It's been off. I actually don't think I've made it since I moved to North Carolina. So it's been off for quite a while. Main reason was my friend Chad, who was the person who I got the fresh hop cones from. They stopped, I believe, at least for the last season, had stopped growing at his like farm there. They were just doing the processing. So I had been hesitant to go to the pelletized hops, but I did do a small, just like, I don't know, 6 bars with some pelletized hops that I got from one of my head brewer friends here in Charlotte, and did that. And so that actually ended up coming out pretty nice. Not quite as strong as the essential oils from the fresh hop cones, but good enough that I want it to be back in the lineup. So yes, it will be. I'm going, and the other issue was I was out of the Tanzania beans, and being a small company, you've got to figure out where the money's going to come from to pay for this batch of beans or that batch of beans, and what's going to be the priority. So I had run out of the Tanzania beans, which I do a lot of. I have probably 4 different bars I use them for, as well as baking chocolate and all sorts of stuff. Got those back, and I have some of the pelletized hops. And so I'm hoping this week to make the bars, and then I age them for at least 3 weeks. And so hopefully, yeah, they'll be back soon.
Awesome. I will keep an eye out
All
to
right.
see when those are released. I got to grab some new ones. It's been a little while. I haven't had the bar in
It
a
has
while.
been. Yeah. It's been a couple of years probably since I've had that up. Yeah. So I'm excited to have it back, because it is it's a really, really cool bar and one of my favorites that I make. So
Yeah, I'll look forward to it. Well, Tyler, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us today.
yeah, it's great to be back. Thanks for reaching out.
Really great thoughts there from Tyler. Really grateful to him for coming on and sharing all of his insight and experience in working with breweries. Even though the relationships that Tyler has with the breweries that he's working with to supply them with nibs and other products aren't actually official collaborations, even though they easily could be if you're considering the similar business relationships that he's talking about. Those could potentially be turned into branded collaborations. But even though the relationships he's talking about are not, a lot of what we talked about in the Collaboration for Chocolate Makers series that we just wrapped up still applies here. Tyler does his research in advance before he reaches out to a prospective business partner. He reaches out to them personally and establishes a relationship. And he works to be a good business partner. He handles some of the marketing. He provides education. He supports their business. He is flexible when he's able to be in terms of meeting their schedules, making deliveries, things like that. A brewery that meets with Tyler or with you, if you're a craft chocolate maker, is going to realize very quickly that the quality of ingredients you can provide them is likely better than what they're getting currently. But the things that Tyler does to go out of his way to make this a positive experience for these breweries that are potentially buying from him is going to cement those relationships. It's going to make them want to continue working with him. It's going to make them want to tell their buddies in the brewing industry about this great company that they get their cacao nibs from. So all of this is not only just a good way to do business and a good way to, to be a good person and good community member, but it is also a smart decision from a dollars and cents standpoint. This is going to help solidify those relationships and potentially lead to more business with that brewery or other breweries down the road. So great advice from Tyler there. I'm going to put links to the past episodes and blog posts that have involved him in the show notes, so you can check those out if you want to. You might be surprised, if you're a craft chocolate maker, how receptive breweries are to what you have to tell them and potentially becoming an ingredient supplier. A lot of breweries, probably the vast majority of breweries in the United States, work with cacao nibs at some point for either ongoing beers or more commonly special release seasonal beers. And a lot of them don't know much about chocolate. So they're just reaching out to their main ingredient supplier who gets them their malt or hops and other things that they need, a big ingredient supply company, and saying, hey, we're going to brew a beer with cacao nibs. Can you send us X amount? And the nibs that they're getting are from a few different sources. Usually they are sourced ethically, but because of the size of the needs of those ingredient suppliers, they have to order in enough quantity that a lot of times those nibs are sitting in warehouses for an extended period of time and are not anywhere near as fresh as what you, or as we just heard, Nostalgia, can provide them. So if you can just get in face to face and show them what you can do, let them smell and taste the nibs and the chocolate, you're probably going to surprise them in terms of what is available at not necessarily much more cost, and what you're able to provide beyond just that freshly roasted product is probably going to be enough to sway a significant number of breweries. If you're not sure where to start, reach out to whatever your closest brewery is, follow the advice that Tyler gave in our conversation, and just let them know that you're interested in this and what you can provide, and see where that goes. And then use all the advice that Tyler provided if you want to make this a bigger part of your craft chocolate business. On the subject of chocolate beer, the Brewers Cup of California just announced its 2026 winners. So I want to share the relevant winners from that tie in with what we're talking about on Bean to Barstool. In the chocolate beer category, gold went to Burning Barrel Brewing's Burning Bell's Nickel. This is a bourbon barrel-aged imperial stout made with vanilla and marshmallows, as well as Ecuadorian cacao nibs. Now, I'm not sure what the source is on those nibs, just the origin is what they share. I was introduced to Burning Barrel at a bottle share in Georgia, of all places, last summer, and had their Nocino Imperial Stout, and it was absolutely fantastic. So I'm sure Burning Bell's Nickel is great as well. Silver went to Solano Brewing Mama Rosa. This is a Champurrado-inspired beer made with cocoa powder. Again, no source on that one. And bronze went to San Diego Night Scenes by San Diego Brewing. I know very little about this beer, just that they're using cacao nibs and Madagascar vanilla. If you've had any of those beers or have any more insider information on what they're doing in terms of sourcing, I would love to hear about it. In the coffee-flavored beer category, gold went to Cafe Americano by Urban Roots. That same beer just won gold at the World Beer Cup in the coffee, porter, or stout category, so it's on a bit of a streak. They are using Temple Coffee Roasters Dharma Espresso Roast. Silver went to Etna Brewing Yakachino Coffee Vanilla Stout. Now, this beer sounds great. Unfortunately, it is pretty clearly using AI-generated label art, which gets a boo from me. Pay artists, please. Bronze went to Crow and Wolf Brewing Odyssey. And then in dessert stout, gold went to Flatland Brewing Year 10, which is made with coconut, hazelnuts, almonds, pecans, vanilla beans, and coffee. Silver went to Moxa Brewing Pastry Mode. We had Moxa on here, I think, last year to talk about their pastry stouts and working with cacao and vanilla. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Pastry Mode is made with hazelnut coffee, 4 different origins of vanilla and coconut. And then finally, bronze went to Hop Secret Brewing What We Drink in the Shadows. Great name there. Made with cacao nibs and hazelnuts. No origin or source information on those nibs. Finally, as you heard in the mid-roll ad in this episode, Final Gravity issue 12 is out now. So check that out if you're interested in a different kind of print beer publication that focuses on personal, human-centered stories. Last thing, Mackenzie Rivers, my friend of the former Map Chocolate, announced recently that she is launching a snail mail chocolate club that will feature a zine, a physical print zine, and optionally you can have your subscription include chocolate as well. So you can check out her website or Instagram, sign up for her newsletter, and check out that subscription club. I will definitely be doing that as well. Thanks to all of you for listening. Thanks to Tyler for coming on the show today. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Bean to Barstool.